Good morning, students. Today we will be studying about communication skills. Okay, in the last class we have studied about listening skills. Now today we will be studying about the communication skills and what are the different process in the communication and its process. Communication, if you see what is the definition of communication is the art. It is an art of transmitting the information. So whatever the information a person has, he can transmit or he can pass on the information through the communication means. So it is an art of transmitting information. It can be any information, any ideas and attitudes also from one person to another. So that is a very simple definition of communication. So it is an art of transmitting information, ideas and attitudes from one person to another. So a communication can happen between two persons or it can happen more than two persons between. Okay, so it is a process of meaningful interaction among the human beings. Human beings mainly communicate, okay, by speaking, through speaking. However, the animals also communicate, but their mode of communication is through various other postures. Okay, so it is a meaningful interaction among the human beings about the meaningful discussion. It is a personal process or it occurs between two people. It can occur between people and it involves change in the behavior because all the persons have the different behavior. They have different behavioral types. So it involves change in the behavior and means to influence others. So through communication we can also influence others. We can also change their way of thinking through communication, through meaningful communication between the persons. Expression of thoughts and emotions through words and actions. Okay, it is an expression of thoughts and emotions through words and actions. So we can also express through our thoughts or through our words and through our actions also. So that is also a mode of communication and tools for controlling and motivating people. So communication can we can say that communication is a tool through which we can control and motivate the people. Okay, so it is a very strong thing. We can also motivate the people through communication and it is a social and emotional process. Features of communication, what are the different features of communication? Like it is a two-way process because the two persons have to be involved during the process of communication, and information sharing and understanding. So during the process of communication, whatever the information or the knowledge about a particular topic is exchanged between the persons, and understanding is also very important. Verbal and non-verbal, it can be communication can be, as I told you, in human beings communication is a verbal process, whereas if you talk about animals and other creatures, then the communication is a non-verbal process, and it is a circular flow. Means the communication is a circular flow. It will flow from one person to another. It goes on passing, and the communication should be goal oriented. If there is a knowledgeable conversation between communication between the persons, then it should be goal oriented, and it is a continuous process and persuasive activity. It is a pervasive activity. Okay, now if you see that communication process through this flow chart, you can understand it very well, that the communication process, it involves a sender. There has to be one sender who communicates, who initiates the communication, and then it encodes certain message. Through communication there has to be certain message and there is a proper message channel. Then if that information, when it passes from one person to another, then the other person decodes the message, that he understands the message, that whatever the message is he is trying to tell. And then finally there is a receiver who receives the message. So this is the message channel, and this is a verbal communication we are talking about. So it involves certain noise also. Then if you try to understand, then what is a message, what can be a message in the process of communication? So a message, we can say, it is a key idea. It has to be a certain idea that sender wants to communicate. Whenever the sender or the communicator is trying to initiate a conversation, then there has to be certain message, and it is a sign that elicits the response of recipient. And after receiving the message from the sender, the recipient or the receiver, he encodes this message, he decodes that message. Communication process begins with deciding about the message to be conveyed. Okay, so communication process, it begins with deciding about the message to be conveyed. Okay, so whenever the communication process starts, then it has to be started with a particular message, and it must be ensured that the main objective of the message is clear, and it should be ensured that whatever the message we are trying to communicate, then it should be very loud and clear, it should be clear. Then components, what are the whatever the various components of communication process? First is the sender, then second one is, first we have talked about the message. What should be a particular, there has to be a clear message or the idea which has to be communicated. Then the second one is sender or encoder. So we can say the sender, a person who sends the message. So sender is a person who sends the message. Okay, and who initiates the communication. And a sender makes use of symbols. He can use makes of you. He can use the symbols, also words or graphic or visual aids, etc. So there are different modes of communication. It can be words, or it can be graphical representation also, or it can be visual aids also, like video and audio or something. So to convey the message, so whatever the modes he can use to convey the message and produce the required response. And after being the message is being conveyed, then the response is generated from the receiver. For instance, a training, for example, if you take an example, a training manager conducting training for new batch of employees. If a particular trainer is conducting a training for a new batch of employees, those are new. Sender may be an individual or a group or an organization. So here the sender can be a person, or it can also be an organization. Okay, for a group of employees who are new to that organization. And the views, background, approach, skills, competencies, and knowledge of the sender have a great impact on the message. So whatever the views and background and whatever the skills he has and the knowledge of the sender, it has a huge impact on the receiver side. Okay, so it has to be very proactive communication should take place. Then second point is, after the send, after we have studied about message, there has to be a certain idea for communication. Then second point is, there has to be sender or encoder. And for third point is encoding. Encoding is a process where the information you would like to communicate gets transferred into a form to be sent or decoded by the receiver. So it is a process where the information which would like to communicate, so whatever the sender wants to communicate the message, it has to be decoded. It has to be decoded by the receiver. Means he has to understand the message. Okay, through through his knowledge and his abilities, he will try to understand that whatever the speaker is trying to make them understand. Okay, so that means decoding the message. Then there are certain channels also for communication. Channels are the way you convey your message. Okay, so channels are nothing but they are the ways, they are the different ways. Okay, like we have seen, like visual representation, or it can be audio or video, or it can be graphical representation. So these are the different channels through which the communicator tries to communicate the message. And these channels include verbal, such as telephone. It can be telephonic conversation, or it can be face to face conversation. It can be face to face conversations, as well as non verbal, such as email or text messaging. So these are all different modes of communication. Each individual channel has its strength and weaknesses in terms of communicating. So these are the different modes of communicating: through email, through text, through non-verbal communications, or through telephonic or face-to-face conversations can be done. So all of them have certain advantages, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses of communicating. For instance, for example, again we will see an example. Written medium is chosen when the message has to be conveyed to small group of people. So always a written communication or the notice kind of thing is notice. Why we release a notice in the colleges? So as to communicate a group of people. while an oral medium is chosen when spontaneous feedback is required. So when we attend the classes, then there is a face to face conversation, so there is not written, it has to be oral, like I am giving you oral lecture. Okay, so oral medium is when it is chosen when there is a spontaneous feedback, when suppose I am taking your class and I'm asking at the same time, I'm also asking certain questions from you, from your side. So it is a kind of oral medium of communication. Okay, so when I expect certain type of questions and answers, okay, so when one to one communication is there, so that is called oral communication from the medium, and misunderstandings can be cleared then and there, so that whatever the doubts are there, that can be cleared that and there. Then fifth point is decoding. Okay, so whenever the sender sends the message, or whenever he is trying to speak something or communicating something, the receiver on the other end tries to decode that message. Okay, so that is called as decoding. Decoding is on receiving the end of communication. So this is the last step of communication, when the receiver receives the message and he tries to decode that message. So it is, this stage is just as important as encoding. So this stage of decoding is also very important, like encoding means sending the message, and receiving the message and understanding, that means decoding the message. Communication can go downhill at this stage if the receiver is not practicing active listening skills. Suppose I am speaking something, and if you are properly listening to whatever I am trying to communicate to you, then that is called as an active listening. Okay, suppose for some of the students, they are not listening properly and they are not paying attention, that means that they are the passive listeners. Okay, so they are not decoding the message what I'm trying to speak to them, what I'm trying to communicate to them. So communication can go downhill at this stage if the receiver is not practicing active listening skills, or if they do not possess enough information to accurately decode the message. So if the receiver is not having appropriate knowledge of the particular topic, then he will not be able to decode that message whatever the sender is trying to communicate to the receiver. Okay, so, and the sixth point is receiver. Receiver is also important. Receiver is a person for whom the message is aimed. Okay, so receiver is the audience. Okay, like I am the sender, I am the host, I am hosting this lecture, and you are the receiver. You all students are the receivers. So receivers is a person who, for whom the message is aimed. So whatever the idea or the information a speaker has, he tries to communicate, or he tries to send it to the receivers. Okay, and they have to be the passive or the active listeners. They should not be a passive listeners. The degree to which the decoder understands the message is dependent upon various factors. Okay, so the receiver, what amount of the information the receiver receives and understands through his knowledge, it depends upon various factors, like knowledge of the recipient. So whatever, some of the students will understand whatever I am trying to speak. Okay, whatever I am trying to communicate, some students will understand it very well, but some of the students on the same time will not be able to understand that much. Okay, suppose some students are able to understand it 100%, some of the students will be able to understand it by 80% or 50, 60%. Okay, so they are different, it depends upon the, now it also depends upon the knowledge of the recipient, their responsiveness to the message. So whatever the message is there, their response also depends. So these are the various factors, and the reliance of the encoder on the decoder, and also the truth, we can say the trust of the encoder to the decoder, or the speaker to the receiver. So these are the various factors. And the last point is feedback. Feedback is an important component of communication process. So nowadays, whatever we do, we are doing online classes. So after that, we are also giving you Google Forms. So why we are giving you Google Forms? So as to get feedback from you. Okay, feedback is also very important. It is an important component of communication process, as it permits the sender to analyze the efficiency of the message. So after getting the feedback, we will be able to understand that how much amount of the information you have received as a decoder. Okay, so as a decoder, how much amount of the information you are able to understand or to decode the message, what we are trying to communicate. It helps the sender in confirming the correct interpretation of the message by the decoder. Feedback may be verbal. So, feedback, whatever the feedback, I can ask you. I can also ask you that how much you understood in the today's lecture, or I can send you. So, this can be the verbal. Okay, verbal through words only, or if it is non-verbal, non-verbal means in form of smiles or signs, anything kind of thing. Or it can be also written form like feedback forms, or the Google forms which you are sending, or reports, memos. Okay, so these are the different kinds of feedback also. So feedback is also an important component of communication process. Here I will end my today's topic. Okay, thank you.